Hello, everybody. All right, it is May 29th. I'm Joe, also known as the Stoic Viking, and today we are going to be covering disguises, covering um, the sort of psychology of what goes around what goes around and involves disguises, and what people actually notice. Do they notice like the small things versus the big things? Do they notice how people actually generally retain information from what they see? Do they see details or do they remember stories? Why witness when it comes to like cases, criminal cases? Why a witness, somebody who was an eyewitness, why it's extremely unreliable. And that psychology is taken into the concept of when we operate in areas clandestinely. How do we go about either disguising ourselves at many different levels versus and how to essentially blend in order to operate within those particular environments, which is obviously uh, change depending where you are, depending on who you are, and all the many different factors that all go into this. All right. So if you guys can hear me, just let me know. All right. So we're going to cover a few things first before we get it. I got a couple videos for us to get into. So um, can you guys hear me? Make sure my mic is working. Let me know. All right. All right, Mr. Pro. I appreciate you guys. All right. Just want to make sure there was some sort of like delay or something like that. All right. So let me pull this up first. All right. So most people think disguises are about changing your face. They're not. Disguises are about changing perception. Humans don't simply recognize faces. Humans recognize patterns, behavior, movement, confidence, context, and even stories. The greatest disguise isn't what changing what people see. It's understanding how people see. How many people have you guys, how many people could accurately describe the last five strangers that you walked past today? If you were the type of person who even got outside and touched grass, but if you were the type of person who actually goes outside and you saw five different strangers, can you accurately describe them, the ones you saw today? And if you are somebody who is a veteran or whatever job that you may be, whatever career field, of those five people, were you able to recognize any of those people who might have been in who might have been in your career field without even speaking a word? And this is not just like today, but like anytime that you've ever seen somebody in your career field, can you basically spot them out without ever saying a word? So basically, just at any time. And if your answer is most have, that's true. And you're answering why, because humans recognize patterns, not just faces. And most often they actually recognize patterns more than they do faces. And that's very important. We'll get into that. So, all right. So we're going to get into a perception. So we're going to watch a video here real quick. One second. Wow, this. All right. All right. So I want everybody to pay attention to this and take this seriously. If you guys already have seen this, don't shout it out in the comments. Also, let me know if you Alright, so we're trying to count how many times the basketball gets passed. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. So, I don't know if anybody's ever done this. They actually made us do this in school. Um, so for anybody, let me stop this real quick. So this is a lesson, right? And this is a lesson that you get taught when you're going through this type of training, when you're getting ready to understand perception and what do people actually look at and what do people actually see. So this is known as unintentional blindness. So this exercise or this sort of video is known as this concept or this theory. It's called the invisible gorilla. So most people, you're focused and you're counting the basketball passes. Majority of people who see this video actually never even see the gorilla. To be honest, I can't remember if I saw the gorilla the first time. I probably didn't. Um, but a lot of people don't ever see him because they're so focused, right? And so that is a lesson because people don't see everything. People see what they're looking for. What is their focus? Like people are, a lot of people think that they're have this ability to be um can multitask. Most people, especially guys, we don't really have this ability. We're singularly focused, and anything outside of that, we've got blinders on. So, how many of you believe? Let me guess. Right? Exactly. So, how many of you actually saw the gorilla? What's up, Guskup? So, so how do you change blindness, right? Because here's the thing is people don't necessarily observe reality. They're building these mental models into what they're already focused on. And once they think they understand something, they stop paying attention. So in that particular exercise, you knew that the task was to count the basketballs. And your blinders essentially went on, and that's all you were focused on. And you probably just saw it as just because of the people were moving around, it just looked like it was another person who was moving around, and you just didn't pay attention. Right. Now let's go back. And for anybody who didn't watch it, let's watch it again. Hmm, sorry, one second. And for anybody who's did, let's watch it again. And for who didn't see it, see how obvious it is. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the first time I saw this, when I was first exposed to this, I'm pretty sure I didn't see the gorilla. But this is a really good first lesson into the psychology of how people see, detect, and even remember things. So, Yeah. Yeah, and obviously I've been doing a lot of this for a career, and I can tell you I'm almost positive I didn't see the gorilla the first time I saw it. So so one of the things that you have to learn about this is that you need to stop being so hyper focused on things, and you have to sort of open your peripheral view when you're actually going around in this world of you're operating in these sort of environments. You cannot be just singularly focused. You have to be looking at everything and anything, right? And while that may seem easy, the way that you do it is how complex is because it complicates. This is how it gets complicated, because if you are somebody who goes into a restaurant, okay, you now have learned this lesson. So now I'm looking at everything, right? You now paying attention to where the exits are, who's in there, everything like that. That is now a dead giveaway that you are now trained. And now that you are trained, you are now compromised and your mission is now done. So how do you do all this? How do you get pay attention to everything without looking like you're paying attention to things? Because that is the key. That is the game, right? So, but before we get it more into that, we're going to kind of cover disguises, and we're going to kind of go into like in this is kind of like what we're taught. This is kind of like what the CIA teaches. For anybody who's going to try to come at me, this is publicly available information. So this is not clandestine. This is not a sensitive or classified information. All right. I verified this. So, all right. So we have three levels of disguises. Okay. So the biggest myth, well, we'll kind of go over real quick, is that about Hollywood in disguises. All right. Hollywood thinks that every disguise that we use is wigs, prosthetics, and fake accents. All right. That is used at some level, right? This is typically which you'll find at the level 3, which is actually the rarest version of disguises we actually use. What we typically use most of the time is level 1 and level 2. And I'll get into why level 3 is actually rarely used, what Hollywood thinks, your Mission Impossible movies, everything like that. But we'll get into that. So, but the thing you have to remember is that when in reality, what most people remember is hair, height, build, age, general appearance, not really general details. People get more of a feeling of what actually happened. This is another reason why general eyewitness testimonies are horrible evidence in any sort of case. So we have the disguise pyramid, if you will. So light 1, these are your light disguises, right? So this is a couple of basic. This is to give you a level of sort of, if you were in an environment and somebody was to see you, right? And they may know you, but if unless they were actually looking you face to face, can this disguise you enough that that person wouldn't know who you are? Level 1 does not supposed to disguise you to, if somebody who knew you and they were looking at you, they would know who you are, right? That's not what level 1 was for, right? We use level 1 for which you'll hear about, was called a quick change, which is to basically, if anybody's looking at you from a distance away, behind, just basically not in front of your face, can you change your appearance enough that you are essentially not recognizable? And that is the goal of level 1. So we're actually going to get into the movements type stuff here in a little bit. So we're going to cover. Okay. So this is what's known as physical. Your disguise is your physical aspect, right? So we're going to talk about your physical appearance, and then next we're going to go into movement. Okay, because movement is a part of that. Because I know some of you are like, well, what about walking with a limp or swinging your arms? All right, we're going to get into that, and I'm specifically going to talk about walking with a limp. Right, and why that's actually not necessarily a good thing, right? So, most people don't recognize people; they recognize patterns, right? And that what that level 1 sort of disguise helps you to disrupt that pattern, because if they've seen you before, right? They've either seen you either they just saw you, their surveillance, you're doing a quick change in order to basically look like you disappear. You're changing the pattern of what you look like. So they already were looking for the specific pattern. You now change it. So now it makes them harder to recognize you, and essentially you've disappeared. Right. And then for somebody who may know you, and you're going to be operating in an area where someone who may actually know what you look like, you're going to change that pattern by essentially having a level 1 disguise that sort of disrupts what you normally wear, right? And so the examples of it is just simply a hat, a beard, and when I mean like beard, this is like your fake beards, if you will. Different clothing, accessories, and what a quick change is, and probably get into this more, it is what we call in the industry, it's can you change your disguise in 37 seconds or less, right? This becomes a timed event when you are learning how to go through this. All right. So the next is your level 2, which is your long-term disguise, right? So this is where you change permanent things about yourself for essentially for you to be in. We typically do this when you're in cover for a long time. So you'll change things about yourself permanently to be in disguise for a long period of time. So level 1 is temporary. Level 2 is for long term. Right. So things like, because it's basically you want to change the pattern of what you look like for a long period of time. So example of this is either growing a beard, shaving a beard if you had a beard, cutting your hair, whether it's, or growing your hair even, changing your hair color, gaining weight or losing it. Usually whatever the opposite of these are definitely something that you can change in order to make yourself look different permanently. Getting tattoos, or if you were somebody who has tattoos, getting them covered up, because there's different ways, makeup and stuff like that. Obviously, if you're getting to that, you have to be a little cautious, or just something you could also do is completely changing the style of what you also wear clothes. So if you can do a number of these different things, these are like things that you would do if you were in cover for a long period of time, and you would change your appearance through these more permanent means. All right. So, and if you do this, a person can become almost unrecognizable over years, not because their face changed, but because their entire pattern changed, right? Because this is this overall look that we're kind of referring to as this pattern, because everything about you, if you were to sit down with a friend and be like, hey, what stands out to you about me? They would name all these different things. And these are all patterns that they see in you. If you change them, you could almost, especially from afar, would become completely unrecognizable to your own friends. All right. So now we're going to get into level 3, the heavy disguises, which most people think are the disguises that we use, which Hollywood portrays as we use. All right. These are used. I can tell you from the Army clandestine side of things in ISA, we don't really do this, right? Not normally. Like the CIA does this way more than we do. And the CIA actually doesn't even do this that much, right? Because, okay, so what you're doing is now this is your prosthetics. These are sort of artificial features in your major transformations. And this can do a lot of things. You can be wearing masks. You can wear palettes on the top of your mouth in order to change your accent. You can wear fake gums, fake teeth, all can change the different shapes of your face, in addition to, wearing masks and different things like that. The problem with this, all right, well, first of all, get in the pros, right? You could be somebody, and somebody who knows you, like your normal face, could stand right in front of you and not recognize you, right? So that's great. Like that sounds like a great thing to use as a disguise, because you go, okay. But you have to remember, a lot of these times when you're operating in these environments, we're going to keep going back to this, you must never appear as a spy, right? You can never appear that you are operational, because once you do, you are then compromised, whether you know it or not. And then you then can compromise, especially if you don't know that you've been compromised. And now that they know that you're you are operational, they're going to put so many people, so much surveillance on you that you won't even be able to detect it. And then you will then go to your next operation and you will compromise the entire mission. Sources, other people, multiple people can get killed just because you gave away that you were trained, right? So why does this tie into this? All right. Plausible deniability. If someone was to come over and see that you had put on either a level 1 or a level 2 disguise, you could, you have plausible deniability. You can explain it away. Like level 1, right? I was like, I just wanted to put on a hat. Like, oh, I don't see very well. I wear glasses, right? You can explain away why you were putting on these different things. Even level 2, I decided, what'd you happen to your beard? Like, oh, I decided, I want to be clean shaven first. Or, why did you cut your hair? Why did you grow your hair? All these different things. Why did you gain weight? Like, oh, I'm really hungry. Why'd you lose weight? I'm trying to make myself better. You can explain all these things away. What you cannot explain away is if you get caught and you're wearing prosthetics. Think about that. Can you think of a plausible reason why anybody who is not operational, who's not a spy, would be wearing prosthetics? And so that is one of the reasons why level 3 is not really, it's rarely used, because it's extremely dangerous. Because once you've been caught, they know that you're a spy. And I don't know if you know what most countries do to spies. You do not get treated well. A lot of countries will just kill you. So level 3 heavy disguise has the highest complexity, but it has the highest risk. There's a great difference between who you are and who people think you are, and the greater the consequences if exposed. So it's used rarely. When it's used for a particular situation, right? And it's very dangerous. You have to understand what you're doing if you ever get to this level of heavy disguise, right? All right. So we're going down to a few questions before we get into the next section. No, you're all good. Appreciate everybody being here. I haven't. Let's see. Saying the big picture and the small picture. Omnivert, covert. So it's basically you have situational awareness. Yes, but the hard part is not just situational awareness. It's situational awareness without appearing that you are paying attention to situational awareness, right? And that's the complicated part of this, right? Because anybody who's ever seen, like, you've ever been at an event and there's a VIP, and that VIP has bodyguards, right? And let's just say that they're clandestinely, like, they've got normal clothes on, right? Even if you didn't see the little earpiece, you know who they are because they're the ones standing there stout and they're constantly looking around, right? That is a giveaway. That's fine because they're bodyguards, right? But when you're in an area and you're operating and you're trying to be somebody who is not operational, you have to be situational awareness without appearing like you're having situational awareness. And that's the hardest part of this, right? And I've talked about this in previous videos, using surveillance, right? How can you can you run surveillance detection routes, SDRs, while not looking like you're somebody who's trying to detect surveillance? Can you do what you did with tattoos, or will they not let you join if you can say it's not okay? No, you can actually join with tattoos. I get this all the time. There were definitely people within the unit who have tattoos, right? And there are ways you can actually cover up tattoos pretty easily with makeup. It's really not that hard. But you also have to be cognizant of, if you're in a situation, obviously, if you have makeup on, you can't go into a pool, right? So there are certain restrictions. If you are somebody, and we're going to get back to this later. So in disguises, it's always easier to add things, right? it's easier for me who does not have tattoos to add tattoos. It is harder for somebody who has tattoos than to remove them or to cover them up. And this goes with, and this is one of the issues that I run into, being as tall as I am. You can add height to people, but it's harder to make people smaller, right? I will get into like, I have to slouch, maybe wear baggy clothing, all these different things. But remember, it's easier to add, it's harder to take things away. All right. So now we're going to get into the quick change. All right. So imagine um, you are going to an operation and you are trying to detect surveillance, right? And this is a no-fail operation. You have to get to this particular operation and you detect that you have surveillance. So what is one of the ways that you can get rid of surveillance? Because remember, you have to get rid of surveillance without thinking that if you just ran away or sped up in your car, they're going to know that you're operational and you're never going to get there, right? You have to be able to do it. So one of the ways that you can do it is we call as a quick change. So if you're being tailed by surveillance, you suddenly will jump into a shop and you have enough clothing on you that whether there's different things that you can do, that you can change your appearance in 37 seconds or less, because that's enough time for you to duck out and then duck back in. And any longer than that, then your surveillance might be suspicious, right? So this is kind of like the industry standard for a quick change. And most people, this is like if your hair, or like you putting a hat over your hair, or if you had a hat on, you take it off. If you didn't have glasses, put them on. If you did, take them off. Um, your overall jacket, whether you would take that off or put one on. Usually those are kind of like the main uh essentially four things, right? Like if you've got bushy hair and then suddenly you grab some water, slick your hair back. Like these are the things that you can do the quickest as far as a quick change. And also like undershirts, you can deal with that. So this is something that you'll hear probably again and again, called the quick change, right? And we use this in operational when we have to operate even though we're under surveillance, right? How do we get rid of surveillance without letting them know we're trying to get rid of surveillance? Because if you want to continue to operate in that environment, that country, that mission, you can never let them know that you are an operator, spy, whatever you want to call it. You can't compromise. If you compromise, yeah, that's a one other thing. I was just reading Surprise, Kill, Vanish about the Billy Waugh drive around cartoon and we're asked to look Sudanese. Pretty interesting. Yeah, so we'll get into some things that are a little bit different when it depends on how you operate. Like, are you on foot or versus you're in a car? And so I'll get to some stories about me, like in, let's just say Pakistan, right? Because there's certain levels of disguises outside of going into prosthetics that someone who looks like me, even with level 1 and level 2, you're still kind of a bit of a dead giveaway. And we'll talk about how you can do like disguises that are like you're in a vehicle and you can pass for as long as there's like enough distance and there's like a window between you. Can you provide us some examples of how you would operate under surveillance but didn't want to be detected, specifically the situational awareness? Okay. So how do you detect typically surveillance, right? If you have like 3 or 4 cars on you or 3 or 4 people on you, depending if it's a walking or driving surveillance, you are going to want to go to make turns and go to places that you would go to. Like there's a store that you want to go to, and then maybe there's another store that you want to go to, and then it doesn't go in a straight line. In order for somebody to follow you, they would actually have to kind of stick out. But you do this because it has to be a plausible reason for you to go to these locations. But they also need to be in places where there's enough turns that for anybody to follow you, you would be able to pick them out, right? So I hope that kind of answers your question, right? But you can't be like, so either one, constantly like looking over your staring behind you. Obviously, there's like objects and mirrors that you can kind of use that you subtly look out the corner of your eye. But the most important part is these called the surveillance detection routes. You have to be a plausible reason for why you or who you're pretending to be would go to these places, right? But a good surveillance detection route involves a lot of like left and different right turns to where if there's no reason that a normal person would still be following you, right? And this has to be good enough to typically detect when you're being followed by 3 or 4 people, because usually if it's a good surveillance team, they're going to hand off. They'll have one guy who's following you, and then they make a turn, then they will have a handoff to somebody else, and then they can follow you. So that makes it a little bit harder, but you have to be able to detect essentially a standard 3 to 4 man team. Is this for humans specifically, for tier 1 units? Do they sport personnel practice these things too? Anybody who is in cover, is operating clandestinely, you have to do this. So obviously this is mostly operational personnel. If you are people who are working at an embassy, maybe you're a support person, there is definitely a time when you may need to make sure that you're not being followed to your home or wherever you might be living outside of the embassy. But this is the most people have to deal with this, especially the part of making sure that they don't know that you have training, is the operational people, because usually you're in clandestine. If you're in official cover, usually when they know that you've had some sort of training, so that sort of drawback is not really there, if that makes sense. Aren't SDRs kind of dead in the age of UTS? No, not necessarily. It's every environment. So one of the ways to get over high tech stuff is to go low tech, and one of the stuff to go low tech, you go high tech. So there's this constant battle, and you can do a number of different things to defeat sort of modern technology and modern trekking abilities. We use a concept of Faraday cages and a number of different things, and then there's a lot of situations. There's definitely old school techniques that are still being used, and occasionally they get brought back up because it's the best way to defeat high technology techniques. All right. I'm a college student interested in commissioning as an officer in SOF. I'm trying to decide between the different branches. Probably use some insight on which branch you suggest. Depends on what you want to do, right? The easiest one probably is to join the Army, to go Ranger or Green Beret, and then you have the option to go Delta Force or ISA. The problem is if you go Navy SEAL, right? The problem is if you don't make the Navy SEAL, you get put to the needs of the Navy, and you can be put in some really shitty job. Same thing goes for the Air Force. You can sign up to basically go PJ, TACP, CCT, and they have a much lower completion rate for their special operations selection. If you don't pass, you go to the needs of the Air Force, right? So I think the Army is just in general more flexible, but it all depends on what you want to do. Like whichever special operations that you want to go to, like if the Navy SEALs fascinate you, cool. If the Rangers fascinate you, cool. If you want to be a PJ, awesome. Let's definitely go give that a shot. Just know that there are some drawbacks in those particular services. And then the Marines, you're limited to MARSOC. You could go Marine Force Recon, which is, arguably it's not technically a special operations unit, but I think the Marines have the least amount of options. And also MARSOC Raiders, while they are good, they're like the newest special operations group on the scene, and they're still learning. Let's just say they've gotten kicked out of country a couple of times. But surely walking around with no kind of RF signature is a giveaway by itself. Not necessarily, right? So you have to understand how RF energy works. So just because, let's just say, I'm tracking your cell phone, and then suddenly your cell phone, I can't track your cell phone anymore, right? There are about 10 other reasons why I may have lost signal. It just doesn't immediately like, oh, this person is a spy, right? It could be like, did his phone die? Or maybe he's now in an area where there's no service, or maybe he's around a electronic system, like maybe a power plant that's emanating a level of electronic magnetic waves that's blocking the signal. There could be a number of different reasons. It's not necessarily a dead giveaway. It is suspicious, in the modern era, but that can be explainable through certain techniques. It's all about plausible deniability. I want to book a fitness consultation to prep for ISA. Is there anything I could prepare beforehand? Well, if you want to do a consultation, just sign up with me. We'll be good to go. All right. So let me continue because let's get back into it. All right. So we talked about the quick change. We talked about level one, level one through level three disguises. What are the pros and cons? Why level three is so dangerous? All right. So, and I talked about this earlier, right? And this is the concept of the disguises. So it's easier to add than it is to take away. So, and there's a couple different things here, but so if you want to make somebody, it's easier to make someone who's younger look older. It's easier to make somebody who's lighter, make them look heavier. Someone who's shorter, look taller. And if you, so it's harder in reverse, right? And also there's another aspect to this is especially when we operate, if you are a young looking person, almost every single time we're going to try to make you look older because older people are less threatening to the younger people, especially if you are in that young 20s, that military age male. We're definitely going to make you look younger. So people who look like me, right? So anybody doesn't know, I'm 6'2" and I weigh closer to 240 pounds right now, unfortunately. It is harder for me to operate in these environments because just me by my own size kind of gives me away, because most places that we operate, people are not normally my size. So, and I get this all the time. People ask me questions. How do someone who looks like you, because we're like, oh, you look like you're in the military, right? How do I operate? So one, and I'll get into this more, but that kind of pertains to this. One of the things that I would do is I would typically wear baggy clothing, because because one of the things that stands out for most people is how my build. I'm very muscular, and I've always kind of been like this. So I need to hide that. So I would typically wear baggy clothing, which would help me to hide my build. And then I would also usually slouch, right? Because one, it makes me look not so confident, right? Because the really confident people really kind of stand out. But then also I'm able to hide some of my size, because you'll be surprised of how probably probably with enough slouching where it doesn't look awkward, I could probably make myself look like 5'9", 5'10". So that is typically two of the biggest things that I would do. And like, for example, when I was operating in the Middle East, depending on what situation I was in, I would actually dye my beard. I've actually dyed my hair and my beard black before numerous times, and gotten a decent tan. I know I'm part Irish and part Norwegian, but I can actually tan pretty well. So that's actually one thing that actually helped me out. All right. Let's check on this. Okay. All right. So as you remember, you can disguise a linebacker, but he's still built like a linebacker, right? So that's the other thing about, because I'm built like a linebacker. So some characteristics are difficult to hide, which is your height, your build, your movement, and your voice, right? Do we have small changes for this? Height, how do you slouch, right? Build, wear baggy clothing. Movement, you can change your movement, but this is actually harder than you think it is, right? Because especially if you're in a situation and your mind is on something else, you may forget that you're trying to change your movement, because you've established this way of moving for your entire life. It's a little bit harder to change. It takes a lot of practice. And then voice, there's a couple things that we can do. Like, you can add little things to your, like, these little pieces that go into your palette, and they can sort of change your voice, and it's different from every person. But and then some people could do accents, right? If you're good at accents, that's something you can definitely do. That is also kind of risky, just because if you're not very particularly really good at it, like, accents can be hard, because most people can do an accent, right? And most people are doing accents because it's fun. They're in a situation where it's not stressful. Where people get screwed up with accents is like, can you do that accent when you're stressed? Can you do that accent while yelling or screaming? You know, can you do that in a high stressful situation? And that's usually where people get screwed up trying to do accents. So age and perception. People make assumptions instantly, right? So you're younger, athletic male, you're energetic, you're aggressive, you're competitive. An older person, you're experienced, you're stable, and most importantly, you're less threatening, which is why we typically will always try to make you look older typically than you are. Because people don't really react to reality, people react to perception. And that's probably one of the most important lessons here. So when it comes to disguises, men versus women, right? It's actually women have a much easier time and have a much broader scope of how they can do disguises. Like we have way more options for women doing disguises than we do for men, right? So, and one of the main reasons for this is it's easy to disguise a woman as a man, like because then they'll just kind of look as like a skinny dude, right? Pretty much like with enough level 1, level 2 disguises, you know, we're not really going to talk about prosthetics. You can make a woman look like a man, you know, maybe up from like if you're right in their face, maybe not so much, but you can do it well enough that you can make them appear as such. It is much harder to do it in reverse. It's much harder for men to try to appear as women, right? Outside of wearing giant burqas and anything like that, that covers up almost your entire build, it's very difficult. So because of this, women have a much larger range of options when it comes to disguises. Hair, makeup, accessories, clothing, because a lot of things that women naturally wear can actually help to break up the pattern of their appearance, which is that using accessories, different types of clothing. For men to do that, that would actually look odd, and that then highlights you, which is the last thing that you want. Because as soon as you're highlighted, you're compromised. It's over, right? Because, all right. Let's see here. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is, all right. So before we go into the next part, we're going to watch a video about, we're going to watch the woman who used to be the CIA's chief of disguise. I think this is actually pretty cool. All right. Give me 1 second. I don't think where I just went. All right. Let me know if you can hear this. All right. Give me 1 second. So you guys don't hear it? All right. I figured this out last time. All right. Let me remove this. Give me 1 second. I know exactly what I did wrong last time. Yep, I see it. All right. Fixed it. We're good to go. All right. You guys ready? Let's start this over. You should be able to
We
hear it now.
always talk about disguise as though it's an onion, whether you're building it or whether you're peeling it off.
Let me know if you can
It's
hear it.
almost transparent layers. And when you get enough of them going, you disappear and this other person is in the room. My name is
Yes.
Jonna Mendez, and I was chief of disguise at the CIA. In my role as chief of disguise, my major concern was always protecting people, protecting our case officers who were going into situations that might be dangerous, but importantly, protecting the foreign people that we were meeting with, who were very often risking their lives. If you were working in Europe and you were meeting with a clandestine source at a cafe, your biggest concern might be that your next door neighbor was going to wander into that cafe at that moment and say, "Hi, Bill," when you weren't Bill. And that kind of casual stumbling upon people was an issue. And so you'd wear what we called light disguise.
So light disguise is also commonly known as the level 1 disguise that we talked about. But I want to go back real quick to what they were talking about when she said you actually need to protect your sources. And this is 100% true. So when you're dealing in this environment, and I keep talking about when we get compromised, you actually, if you get compromised, you might just have to go home and go to the mission. But if you don't know that you're compromised and then you go to your meeting, they may just leave you alone, but they may just kill you. They may kill your source. You almost always, your source is in more danger than you are, based off of the political situation and how that country feels about things. But that person is now a traitor to them. And a lot of places will just kill you, essentially, your sources. Let me fix it. So I cannot stress this enough, that your ability to never get compromised, which is the hardest part about this job, is really to protect everybody who's involved in that mission, especially your indigenous sources. All right.
Light disguise can be something as simple as a wig, maybe some facial hair, maybe some glasses, not a big deal. The other extreme is advanced disguise that you would use for up close and personal for an extended period of time, where the person you were talking to would have no idea that you were not in true face. One of the things,
and what she's talking about is that's that level 3, that's that prosthetics, the heavy disguise.
that was going on when I was chief of disguise was an enormous research program into the new advanced disguise system. It was basically the masks that everybody always wondered if we used masks, and this was the beginning. This is a series of photographs of when I met George H.W. Bush in the Oval Office.
So you got to remember, this is George H.W. Bush. So this ability has been around since the early 90s, or might have been as late as, because what did he come in office? 88, I think. Yeah, because Reagan was 80 to 88. So 88 to 92, I believe, was Bush.
And revealed to him that I was briefing him wearing a mask. When you go to disguise a person, the general idea is that you're going to meet with someone in this disguise, and they're going to write a memo of the person that they just met with. We want every item in that memo that describes you to be wrong. If we're looking at a man and we want to change the way he looks, start at the top, and the first thing that comes up is hair. What's he got, and what do you want to do with it? If he has curly hair, you want to go straight. If he has dark hair, you might want to go light.
Yeah, so this is all like, this is now she's kind of talking about your like level 2 disguises, the long form things, the things you can change permanently, like make his hair straight, change his hair color.
If he's young, you might want to throw in some gray. If he's old, you might want to cover up the gray. Do you present with facial hair? If you don't, maybe we're going to give you some. If you're going to be somewhere for a while, maybe we're going to have you grow some. We have made prostheses on occasion. You could actually change cheekbones. You can add something here. You can add a forehead. You can do a nose. We could do what we call dental.
Remember, you can add and you can't take away. But for some of us who already have a large forehead, it's a little bit harder because we already have a huge forehead.
Facades. We can change actually the shape of your face with the right dental facade. This piece is called a plumper because it increases the plumpness of your gums. And when it does that, it changes the profile of your face. The last thing is artificial palates. We take an impression of the top of your mouth. They can change your enunciation. They can cause a slight lisp. It's a little bit different with everybody who wears one, but if it's enough, it's very useful. We very often discover that older looking men are considered less threatening than younger looking men. So we like to age a person. With women, you have a broader range of what you can do. You also have one extra step. You could turn a woman into a man. I would mention that it's almost impossible to turn a man into a woman. What we do is always additive. We can make you taller. We can make you heavier. We can make you older. We can't go the other direction. You want to be the person that gets on the elevator and then gets off, and nobody really remembers that you were even there. That is is a design goal.
All right, so that is by far the most important part about this. The most important lesson is that whatever disguise that you're using, the main goal, and especially in these operational environments, is to be the gray man, right? You're going to hear that term quite a bit. Can you go into an area and just not be noticed, right? Can you not be the one who stands out? Because remember, people are not seeing you particularly, they're noticing patterns, right? And that's how it's actually pretty easy to kind of disguise yourself or to uh kind of fall or sort of what's the word we're looking for to get like in the drawback, like the to blend in, if you will, to camouflage yourself, but to blend in with the greater group is because people are noticing patterns, right? And when they notice patterns, what's the thing that they notice, especially when looking at group? What stands out? So you need to blend in and you need to not stand out. So, like if you're in a country, what would the men who you are appearing to, what would they wear, right? How would they walk? How would they conduct themselves? How do you hold your cigarette? How do you stand? Like all these different things are examples of what people may do in different cultures versus they do in America. So you have to essentially un-Americanize yourself, unless you are a person who is trying to undercover or A-list for whatever they maybe you're an American businessman or something like that. I don't know. It all depends on who you are essentially pretending to be. And that's the most important part. Can you go around and not be noticed, not highlight yourself? And if you are, you can operate. What the CIA would do in a cafe in Europe? Well, I've got some stories. She said trans women ain't real. That's what I got from that. Civil soldier, you're not wrong, brother. Right? Because well, maybe that's what trans women are, right? Maybe they're the ultimate spies. Maybe I'm a trans woman. I don't know.
The disguise labs at CIA. Disguise isn't just all about the facial oval. It's about how you dress, how you present yourself in a public environment. Americans are oblivious to what it is that reveals them to a foreign crowd or a foreign intelligence service when they're out in public. In terms of behaviors, there are a lot of small actions that give us away. The way
Yeah, so this is definitely one of the biggest problems we have, or the learning curve is Americans. We are just so American, right? Especially from the guys in the military. We've been so American for most of our careers to try to learn these other cultures and then try to minimize our Americanness is definitely one of the harder learning curves in the military side of clandestine work, if you will.
we eat. Europeans use the fork in their left hand and it doesn't travel back and forth to the right hand, whereas we're constantly putting down a knife and moving utensils back and forth. The way we smoke, we put it between our first two fingers. They tend to hold a cigarette between the thumb and the first finger. When an American stands,
So this is one of the things, the eating thing. Luckily, I grew up in Europe, so I already ate like Europeans. But when I started going to the Middle East, they also do things completely differently, like eating with your hands and other things like that. So it all depends on the culture that you're going to. This is obviously, she's talking about Americans going to Europe, but when we operate in other places, the cultures are different everywhere you go. And as she's going to show you, like,
they tend to support themselves on one foot or the other. In Europe, they stand straight up. They don't lean on anything. Their weight's equally on their feet.
Another thing that people don't necessarily talk about, so like when most like Europeans are walking around, they're not actually making eye contact with people as they're walking by, and they're not saying hi, right? That's definitely an American thing. So when you're walking around, you don't really look at other people. If you do, that's kind of a dead giveaway that you're an American, that you're like, hey, you're doing the whole meme of the white boy, like American white boy, how you give him the nod, right? So that's something, like all these little things are tells. and they're so subtle, and it's hard because you've learned them your entire life.
Changing the way that you walk requires some amendment to what you're doing. You're going to need a physical apparatus to make you walk differently. You can't possibly say, okay, now I'm going to limp. To change my walk, I put a little piece of gravel in my shoe, just a little thing that pinches my toe, and it changes my walk whether I want to or not. You can put a
So this is awesome because this is probably one of the most subtle things to change your walk, because as she said, you can't not really change your walk without some sort of assistance or something that forces you to do that, because you have lived your entire life doing this, right? So it's really hard to retrain your body, because your body, you're an adult, like, anywhere between 20, 40 years old, 50 years old, depending on how long you want to do this job, and you have to change your walk. But yeah, something is putting a rock in your shoe. Great subtle way to do it.
a bandage around a knee, something that restricts you will change your walk. Disguise can be applicable to you in your everyday life in terms of traveling around the world and staying safe. I would use Paris as an example. Anytime you approach Notre Dame Cathedral or those bridges that cross the Seine, those are places where there are groups of people that either want to pick your pocket or they're going to make some kind of trouble, and they cluster at these choke points. And if they can tell from your sneakers, if they can tell from your baseball hat, or a lot of other behaviors that we exhibit, that you are an American, you become a target. If you just want to play it safe, there's nothing wrong with stopping in a local store and buying some local clothes. If you
So that's also very true. So this goes back to being de-Americanized, right? So what are things that are very American? One, baseball caps. Most people do not wear baseball caps outside of the United States. Jeans can be worn in some places in Europe, but it's a very American thing. Jeans are very American, and obviously wearing like certain types of sneakers, also a very American thing. So when you go to a certain place, especially if that's who you're pretending to be, which is non-American, you're pretending to be somebody who is from that area, you need to look the part, and not only just for the part, but the age of your part, right? Obviously, you look at the United States. People who are in their 40s in the United States dress differently than people who are in their 20s, right? So whatever age or group that you're essentially emulating, you need to dress like that group in order to not stand out, in order not to disrupt the pattern that everybody sees. Because if you disrupt the pattern, you're going to highlight, and then you're going to be compromised. Keep going back to that.
smoke, get some local cigarettes. You can always add a pair of glasses. You can always add some kind of hat. Just back yourself off from that American imprint that we all carry with us in so many ways. All these things that we do are unconscious, and they are hard to change. If you have some friends who are thoughtful, you could probably sit down with a friend and say, what is it about me that is just a dead giveaway? And they're going to tell you things like, oh, it's your laugh, or it's the way you sit. God, you always slouch down in the chair. They can help you find those pieces of your visual personality that are easy to get rid of once you know they're there. People have expectations of what you're going to present to them when you're being you. We try and brush those away.
So that's something that you not only need to learn about yourself. You need to learn about what your mannerisms are. And there's a couple different ways that we kind of do this, especially if you are operating with some like your friends. They can help you to analyze yourself, or you can even go out with your own family and just very simply, very subtly just be like, hey, what are some things that stand out to you? Like, what do you think about my walk? Things like that. Like, these are all things that you need to be aware of, because if you're not aware of them, you can't change them.
Quick change is the ability to clandestinely change your appearance. Typically, when you're out on the street, you're using the crowd as a mask. When we're doing this, we measure it in the number of steps, and then we rehearse whoever's going to do it. You're going to go in the gap. You have 37 seconds to come out with those changes. The goal of the quick change is to disappear. If you had surveillance and they discovered that you were gone, you didn't want them to think that you had escaped. You wanted them to think that they had lost you.
Once again, it's all about The difference is it was their failure that they just lost you versus you were somebody who escaped. If you would now, if they think that you escaped, you are now compromised, and you then could then not only endanger the mission, but the people's lives who are also involved in these missions. So this is why this is very important.
It's their fault.
All right, so you're going to see kind of like examples of this. To be able to do this on, if you're going to do this like how this guy is, the changes need to be essentially very subtle. And so, like, can you do it on the walk? A lot of when you do the quick changes, you typically want to kind of duck around a corner real quick, as your surveillance is probably like 30 seconds behind, especially if you're walking. And that's typically when you do this. You don't really do it kind of like on the fly, like some people, like you would see probably in Mission Impossible and things like that, just because it's riskier. And obviously there's situations where you have to do the risky situation, but typically you're trying to mitigate risk with all these situations because it's just another level, another thing that you can get compromised on.
Blending in is situational. It depends on where you are. You need to understand what the commonality is there, what this tribe is that you want to join. And once you join that tribe, you can typically move around freely because there's no.
So if he had done this, obviously, I'm pretty sure for the video to shoot this is better to see it like this. But what you typically would have done is you would have had something like that. That's a good quick change outfit. You would have been, and when you made your turn on your surveillance detection route or on your way to your mission, which could have been both, you would have done that around the corner, because if they were surveilling you and they saw you do that, that would be a compromise. So you want to do it around the corner as soon as you turn the thing. And that's why we have a time limit where we try to do it, like, essentially said 37 seconds, but obviously the quicker you can do it, 30 seconds or less.
Suspicion. You can't summon up a disguise in the middle of an event, but going to the event, you can say to yourself, I think I'll leave my baseball cap and my sneakers, and I'm going to leave all of that in my room. And you can realize that being out on the street as an American is sometimes dangerous. One of our officers, probably working out of the American Embassy, would have surveillance 24 hours a day. They'd have teams of people following them, but they had work to do. They had to communicate with people clandestinely. And the extremes that we would go to disguise those people was the most interesting and the most challenging part of the job.
This is probably where they were using the level 3 heavy disguises, in addition to some other stuff that are some other techniques. But yeah. All right. So let's go back to this. All right. So now we're going to get into cover versus legend. And you hear this term cover legend, right? So when you go somewhere, right? So we've already talked about your physical cover, right? Your cover and your legend is your situational cover, like almost like more like your atmospheric, your mental cover, if you will. So your cover is who you are. And, whether it's like I'm a photographer, I'm a tourist, a businessman, a journalist, whatever is your cover before when you go to that area. That's who you essentially are emulating and pretending to be. Um, the legend is the background, right? Why should, if you are like, okay, so why should I believe you? So if you're pretending to be a photographer, right? What other photo shoots have you done? Like, where's your work at, right? What's your biography? What's your background? What's your history? And all this has to be extremely consistent because, it's this will stick out. This will be odd if you are not somebody who can essentially have a decent enough background. What the most common misconception is most people think that the government gives you the cover and legend. Typically, they'll give you the initial cover, but the legend, typically, you have to come up with yourself. And there's good reasons for that, right? Like, one, it's more organic. You want to make it something that like you kind of experience, but also at the same time different because you don't want to trace it. But for example, somebody who has like I'm one of five children, so right, so my legend might, of who I'm pretending might be, might have four or six children, right? Just change it a little bit, just change it like little details, a little bit different, but something that's familiar. That definitely helps in those particular situations when you're creating that legend. um Especially when it comes to like your history, your background, you want to, when you tell people what places that you have lived, you want to know those places. You may not have actually lived there, but you've been around there enough to where you could essentially know of places where you could have lived. And so it asks you questions about like, oh, which area did you live in this town, even though you may not have lived there, but you've been there enough that you could be like, oh, I lived over this area, which you, because you've been there enough, right? And if you had not, maybe you take a trip, go hang out in that particular area for a week or two. Do a little research. Does the quick change concept apply to the RF problem we talked about before? Those examples you gave before account for small periods of time, but not saying doing a multi-area SDR without any phone. So that's where, okay, so there's a couple different ways to tackle this, right? And we're gonna stay more in the theoretical realm of these things, so we're not gonna get into anything super specific, right? So you are going to typically acquire multiple devices. So if the device that people know that you have is, maybe that when you start on that SDR, you have the device you're going through, and then when you start to make, whatever your turn to go operational, maybe you then put that into some sort of Faraday cage or device, and then you also have your other phone, which then you then turn on to, if you need to use a phone, you have that. And so there's a couple different multiple devices, and then eventually you need to be wherever you operate. Maybe then before you go and turn your other phone back on, you get to another area, but a plausible area for you to have been in that area, just in case somebody saw you or just in case somebody stopped you. So there is definitely, you have to tie in not just your physical um signature, but your RF signature, because that also plays into it. So you have to be able to manipulate both of those at the exact same time. And that's why doing this in the modern era is definitely more difficult, but it's still doable through a number of different techniques. Um, let's just say that you can also emulate where your phone is located. You can spoof it. You can put it in a different location. There are abilities to change the locations, kind of like similar to how we, for VPNs, we change where the internet maybe see where they think your computer is located. There are things like this that exist for all types of different technology. I hope that answers your question. So the cover is the title and the legend is the story. So the psychology of cover, one of the biggest misconceptions is people think that a cover means becoming somebody else. Well, not exactly. You have to think naturally inside that role. You have to understand it. You have to stop sounding rehearsed, and you have to be able to detect uncertainty. The cover supports the mission does not support the cover. This is a very true fact. So the thing that you have to remember is that when you are operating, the best way to stay in your cover and within your legend is to believe the lie, right? Because if you don't believe it, you'll slip up, like you'll just randomly, right? But we also still have to operate, you still have to be able to, like, you can't have this split, you have like this split personality, but you can't just throw who you were away. You have to be able to access that when you need to. So there's like compartmentalization, and you have to remember that you're like, hey, I'm an operator, I'm here to do this mission, and you have to do it, and you need it to be there to when you can access it. But otherwise, you need to believe the lie, and you need to live it as well as you can to protect your cover, and as well as the assets and the overall mission that is involved. All right. So we're going to go into, all right, we're going to watch. All right, you guys want to see a quick change? I'm going to show you a quick change real quick, right? Let me actually fix this. All right. All right, so we're going to watch. Who knows who Andrea Bustamante is? All right. There's kind of like out there, you got like two CIA guys who are out there. You got John Kirikow and Andrew Bustamante. And I decided, in the theme of watching this video, we're going to do a quick change so I can be more like Andrew Bustamante in this particular role. So, all right, here we go.
So I discovered I had messy hair in CIA because I used to go Muj. We called it Muj. I used to go Mujahideen style, big burly beard and crazy wacky hair.
Yeah.
Because an ambiguously brown guy with a big beard and long hair can go anywhere in the world without anyone even noticing him. They either think that he's a janitor or they think that he's like some forgotten part of history, but nobody ever thinks that that guy is a spy.
So unfortunately, I did not have this luxury. I had to operate around the fact that I look the way that I do. I look very American, and I'm too big for my own good. So while he had this ability, I did not. So this was more complicated for me. So I will give you an example. Let's just say in Pakistan, right? And if you guys have seen Zero Dark 30, you'll kind of know the scene. But when they're searching for Osama bin Laden in one of the towns, and they're trying to capture the couriers or the messengers' cell phone, they're going around the town, and they've got guys in the vehicle who are obviously Americans, but they don't ever get outside of the vehicles. Okay, so this is a common thing. In that type of situation, if we would wear the sort of the typical garb, I forget what it's called, but the white man dress, and then we would have on the a bit of the headdress, but we would dye our hair black. So if you were within the vehicle and somebody was looking from far enough away, and because you're slightly distorted between the glasses, especially because the windows there in that country were always very dirty, so that always kind of helped. People could not see you with a well enough resolution that you could actually pass. Like someone like me with a dyed black beard in that particular outfit could drive around and be in that vehicle and basically pass. I wouldn't break the pattern, if you will. But the second if I ever had to get outside of the vehicle, people would automatically know. So there's a certain level of like, yeah, can you operate in a certain level, depending on how you look, with enough distance where people can't see that level of resolution that you can then essentially be to break that pattern and then be compromised. So that is an example of something like I was limited to that essentially type of role and that type of disguise, if you will. Because even if like we were to do something as crazy as doing prosthetics, my accent would give me away immediately. Like even if I was like much better at Arabic, my accent would give me away immediately.
So it was for me, it was one of my favorite disguises. It's what's known as a level 2 disguise. One of my favorite disguises to don was just dilapidated brown guy.
Can you actually, we'll just take a million tangents. What's a level 2 disguise? What are the different levels of disguise? What are the disguises?
Yeah, there's 3 levels of disguise by and large. Level 1 is what we also call light disguise. So that's essentially you put on sunglasses and a ball cap and that's a disguise. You look different than you normally look. Mm-hmm. So it's just different enough that someone who's never seen you before, someone who literally has to see you just from a picture on the internet, they may not recognize you. That's why you see celebrities walk around with ball caps and oversized jackets and baseball hats, because they just need to not look like they look in the tabloid or not look like they look in TV. That's level 1. Mm-hmm. Let me jump from level 1 to level 3. Level 3 is all of your prosthetics, all the stuff you see in Mission Impossible, your fake ears, your fake faces, your fat suits, your stilts inside your feet, all that's level 3. Whenever they make any kind of prosthetic disguise, that's a level 3 disguise, because prosthetics are very damning if you are caught with a prosthetic. If you're caught wearing a baseball hat and sunglasses, nobody's going to say you're a spy. But when you're caught with a custom made, nose.
This is where we're talking about plausible deniability. This is like a big thing because, occasionally you're going to get tripped up and be like, hey, I recognize you, right? Like you can explain away basically level 1 and level 2 disguises. You can't explain away a level 3 disguise. It's not working.
Prosthetic that changes the way your face looks, or when someone pops out a fake jaw and they see that your top teeth don't look like they did in this prosthetic, then all of a sudden you've got some very difficult questions to ask or to answer. So level 3 is extremely dangerous. Level 1 is not dangerous. Level 2 is long-term disguise. Level 2 is all the things that you can do to permanently change the way you look for a long period of time, so that whether you're aggressed in the street or whether someone breaks into your hotel room or whatever, it's real. So maybe that's, maybe you get a tattoo. Maybe you cut your hair short. Maybe you grow your hair long. Maybe you go bald. Maybe you start wearing glasses. Well, glasses are technically a prosthetic, but
they're not. No, glasses are not a prosthetic. You can explain away glasses pretty much in almost every single situation, right? People don't really know, because there's a lot of people you meet who wear glasses and who wear glasses sometimes who don't. Could you be wearing contacts? Like you could easily be somebody who normally wears contacts and now you're wearing glasses. So it's super explainable. So him saying that glasses are prosthetics, I disagree with that.
If you have teeth pulled, if you gain 20 pounds, really gain 20 pounds.
Plus, nobody knows what your eyesight is. Like, how many people know, oh, you know my eye doctor? Like, have you seen my results? Like, no.
Or lose 15 pounds, whatever you might do. All of that's considered level 2. It's designed for a long-term mission so that people believe you are who you say you are.
Who's the king of level 2 disguises? Christian Bale. Talk about an actor who has gained weight, lost weight so many different times, between being the skinniest dude in the world to being the fattest dude in the world to being fucking Bruce Wayne, fucking jacked as shit.
You are in that disguise.
A lot of that is physical characteristics.
Correct.
What about what actors do, which is the
method acting?
Yeah, the method acting, sort of developing a backstory in your own mind, and then you start pretending that you host a podcast and teach at a university and then do research and so on.
See, I always knew Lex Friedman was a Russian spy. So, here he is admitting to it, basically.
Just so that people can believe
that
you're not actually an agent. What is that part of the disguise levels or no?
So yes, disguise has to do with physical character traits. That's what a disguise is. What you're talking about is known as a cover legend. When you go undercover, what you claim to be, who you claim to be, that's called your legend, your cover legend. Every disguise would theoretically have its own cover legend. Even if it's just to describe why you're wearing what you're wearing, it's all a cover. So the method acting, this is a fantastic point that I don't get to make very often, so I'm glad you asked. The difference between CIA officers in the field and method actors is that method actors try to become the character. They try to shed all vestiges of who they really are and become the character. And that's part of what makes them so amazing. But it's also part of what like makes them mentally unstable over long periods of time. It's part.
So we'll continue this, but I actually kind of sort of disagree with this.
Part of what feeds their depression, their anxiety, their personal issues, because they lose sight of who they really are. Field officers don't get that luxury. We have to always remember we are a covert CIA intelligence officer collecting secrets in the field. We have to remember that. So we're taught a very specific skill to compartmentalize our true self separately, but make that true self the true identity. So then we can still live and act and effectively carry out our cover legend without ever losing sight, without ever losing that compass true north.
So partly true, but like I definitely the method acting is one of the best ways to be in cover, right? It's just you can know, like I'm sure even method actors can snap themselves out of it, or be able to like, hey, I'm not gonna be this today, right? In a very similar way that they want to stay in that role for that entire movie, and just like you want to stay in that role for that entire operation, right? But I'm sure if that actor I don't know, it all depends. But there is a case, and there are studies where people, even in the military and in the CIA and other agencies, who are in cover for so long that they will start to have some mental issues as well. So this is not just something he's talking about, like we're trained, right? But like with a lot of things, it's easier said than done. And this is actually an issue that a lot of long-term people who are in long-term covers suffer from.
Of who we actually are. And then we can compartmentalize and secure all the information that we need, retain it, remember it, but then return to our true self when we get back to a position of safety.
Is it possible to do that? So I just have kind of anecdotal evidence for myself. I really try to be the exact same person in all conditions, which makes it very easy. Like if you're not lying, it makes it very easy to, first of all, to exist, but also to communicate a kind of authenticity and a genuineness, which I think is really important. Like trust and integrity around trust is extremely important to me. It's the thing that opens doors and maintains relationships. And I tend to think, like when I was in Ukraine, so many doors just opened to the very sort of high security areas, and everywhere else too. Like I've just interacted with some incredible people without any kind of concerns. Who's this guy? Is he gonna spread it? All that kind of stuff. And I tend to believe that you're able to communicate a trustworthiness somehow if you just are who you are. And I suppose method actors are trying to achieve that by becoming something, and I just feel like there is very subtle cues that are extremely difficult to fake. Like you really have to become that person, be that person. But you're saying as a CIA agent, you have to remember that you are there to collect information. Do you think that gives you away?
So one of the flaws in your argument is that you keep referring to how you feel. I feel this, I feel that, I feel like this, I feel like that. That feeling is a predictable character trait of all human beings. It's a pink matter. We call it pink matter. It's a cognitive trait. You are not alone in trusting your feelings. All people trust their feelings. But because what CIA teaches us is how to systematically create artificial relationships where we're the one in control of the source that is giving us intelligence. And the core element to being able to control a relationship is understanding the pink matter truth of feelings.
All right. So this is interesting. So talking about pink matter, right? And how you this is how you develop relationships and whether or not people think that he's basically saying that if you are somebody who's like pretending to be somebody, that essentially you have the feelings that you would be able to detect it, right? Well, we have all lied before, like throughout our childhood. As guys, I've lied to women before, vice versa, everything like that. You know what emotions, what their emotions they're looking for, and you know how to fake those emotions. So just because someone is pretending, you think that you might be able to detect that they're pretending. It's actually much harder than you think it is. And especially if you do not know the person, and we can get into this, well, actually we can get into it now, but this concept of like people like, okay, I know how to tell people lying by looking at them because their eyes go up this way, or they do these sort of like features where you probably read in books, like this is how you detect if someone's lying, right? That's not really true, right? In order for you to really be able to do that, you need a baseline. You are needing to know that person. So if you're operating an area and these people don't know you, you have a much larger like room to operate and tell lies and do everything because they don't know you. They don't have a baseline for you when you're lying, if that makes sense. So, all right. As much as I love to watch me some Andrew Bustamante, we are going to continue. All right. All right. So now we're going to get into some concepts, right? So why if you're a veteran, right? Why does veterans easily recognize veterans, right? It's because you can automatically see their posture, their confidence, their movement, their bearing, and probably even their attitude, right? Because you've seen this within that military. Like there's a certain people that they move, they carry themselves in a certain way. When you see it, you can immediately identify it, right? So when you're in these areas, like you need to understand these different things, these characteristics. So when you're in an area, you definitely don't want to continue that military posture, confidence, moving, bearing attitude, because there might be some other military dude who's there and be like, oh, that dude's military, even when you're pretending not to be. So that's something. So these communities develop recognizable patterns, right? And we keep coming back to it, the patterns. So which another one is how movement gives people away. So what reveals more about somebody? Do you think it's their face or their movement? A lot of people would think it's their face, but you actually be surprised how much is actually people's movement, because movement is more of a pattern recognition than somebody's faces. And it's easier to disrupt that pattern of the face in order to make yourself blend in. It's harder to blend that movement in, right? Because that movement, one, it's harder to disguise because you've been doing it your entire life. Because it reveals your training, your confidence, your stress, and even possibly your occupation and your experience based on what you do. Because you notice like certain people in military still walk a certain way. Maybe a lawyer, typically like walks a certain way, right? Because athletes move differently, veterans move differently, pilots move differently, dancers move differently. Your body tells a different story, especially that's what you've been doing your entire life. So the next is like is the surveillance detection paradox. So one of the best concepts is the harder someone tries to look, the more notable. I'm sorry, let me start this over. So this is the surveillance detection paradox, because the harder that somebody is trying to look, the more noticeable they become. And this goes back to, if you are somebody who's paying attention to all the exits, you're looking for surveillance, and you're obviously doing it, you're compromised, right? You cannot do that. Like, you have to be able to look and not being noticed that you're looking or that you're detecting, right? For example, a normal person would order coffee, probably check their phone, and then just go find their seat, probably have their head buried down into their phone. A overly aware person would probably check the exits, scan the corners, and basically keep checking their watch and keep like updating, like, hey, what's going on? They're always constantly looking around. That's not normal, right? And that's something you always have to keep in mind, is what is normal, right? And you trying to detect surveillance is not normal. You trying to see if I'm ready to get out of this coffee shop just in case somebody comes in and tries to hit it, that's not normal, right? You can look at that, you can do that, you can accomplish all this by being very subtle about it, by maybe using the reflection of something, maybe just looking out of your corner eye, just doing a random scan. As you're going to the bathroom, you're doing a quick scan of normal, but you do not want to be just standing there looking at those particular things and observing that only somebody who's overtly aware would actually be doing, which is, you're highlighting yourself, because the mark of a professional isn't that he's observing, it's that nobody notices that he's observing. And that's extremely important in this line of work. All right. So why do the best operators don't look operators? So this is the payoff. Everything before this section basically leads to this point. So humans notice anomalies. Humans notice people trying way too hard. And the best operators operate completely normal, and you can't tell that they're operators, right? They don't walk around with that confidence. Like, that's one of the hardest part about the military clandestine, because we have so much time being that military type guy, that all those characteristics and how you move, how you talk, how you dress is harder to shake than some of the guys who go to the CIA who come straight out of college. Because the greatest disguise is normality. So, which always brings us back to the gray man concept, which is, you're not invisible, because trying to be invisible, that's actually highlighting yourself. And in trying to hide, also something that highlights yourself. You need to be forgettable, right? You need to be seen, but be forgettable. And that's the part, because anything that stands out is memorable, and you need to avoid becoming memorable, because if that you have, then that's when somebody's noticing you. You know, if they ever see you again, they'll be like, oh, I remember that guy. And that could also lead to a possible compromise of you and your mission and the people that you work with. So let's see. All right. So thinking fast and slow, right? So there's some interesting concepts here, right? So how, if you are somebody who is in these particular situations, right? We have kind of like this broken up into like two different systems, right? So you've got system one, which is your fast, instinctive pattern recognition. And system two is your slow, analytical, conscious system. So many veterans who have experienced that something feels wrong, they know before even knowing why, because of that pattern recognition. So this comes to, like, when we are trying to detect whether people are operating around us, we are doing the exact same thing. We are trying to recognize patterns. We are trying to look for those guys who just came into the coffee shop and who are in shape, have that military confidence, that look about them. Maybe their hands are in their pockets. You're looking for pattern recognition because it stands out. That's not something that you would normally see in that particular environment. So this, you have to think about this. But also, if you're trying to detect people, you might be in an environment where people are more subtle. Maybe you're not looking for that because the people that you're working with are better than that. So now you're looking for the subtle tells, the things that you would do. How would you put yourself in that game, in their mind, in their shoes, right? So this is where this, like, the whole spy game becomes this whole cat and mouse thing. Viper sword, is that something you have to untrain? Like, which do you have to untrain? Like, what exactly do you mean? So the gift of fear, because fear is information. Your subconscious often notices things before your conscious mind does. So, but there's a difference between fear, intuition, and anxiety. And that's something kind of goes back to essentially your gut instinct, that when your sort of spidey sense goes off, you shouldn't ignore it, right? There's a reason why suddenly something has been set off within your subconscious, and learning how to identify that and listen to your subconscious, even if you have not quite compiled and understood what's actually going on, you should definitely listen to that. But also at the same time, remember, if you're in a situation where if you're suddenly got afraid of something and you're not somebody who would typically have the training to be afraid, you have to disguise that fear, right? Like that anxiety. If your spidey senses go off, don't make it obvious. Like, hey, something just happened, and I'm up like a fucking prairie dog looking around, like, hey, or what do they call them? The meerkats, looking around. Like, you also something you have to disguise, because that's also a dead giveaway. But you also, to be in this particular environment, you need to be really good, have a really good memory. And there's many different ancient memory techniques, memory places, visualizations, association. You need to know what works for you in order to how to memorize things, because everybody's different in how they memorize things. Like okay, so Viper Soar. So is there anything you have to untrain? Like the posture that guys have being in the army is more recognizable than, say, a regular civilian, simply because of their training discipline. Do you need to get rid of that to help you blend it? Absolutely. That's one of the things that I had to do first. And that's actually a big learning curve for all the military guys who get into this type of work, is that we have to unlearn that stuff. Like, I definitely had to learn how to not appear confident. Like I said, I would wear baggy clothing. I would slouch. I wouldn't look people in the eye. I would do everything that I could to, even I would shorten my walk, because a lot of people have a very lengthy, very confident walk. I would try to make it shorter. And let's switch back to the hat, since we're no longer emulating Andrew Bustamante. So yeah, it's definitely something you have to learn to untrain. And we definitely have a harder time with it, because because at that point, when you're doing this type of work, you've been in the military for like 10 years at this point. And yeah, that's something that's a little bit harder to shake off. So, all right, if anybody's got any different questions, so we're going to probably close it out. Because, so the history of intelligence, technology, and tradecraft, most people think intelligence work is about gadgets. Obviously we get that common misconception from James Bond, but actual, like, spycraft, history shows that it's about psychology, it's about observation, it's about patience, it's about human behavior and relationships. And it's really understanding human psychology and the human factor. But obviously nowadays we have to incorporate the digital part of this, because there's a digital part of Spycraft, which obviously complicates things, but it doesn't make it impossible. You can still operate under it. And there are certain cases where, because people rely so much on the digital world, that you can actually, if you can get out underneath the digital surveillance, that you might actually have, you can actually operate with more, in certain situations, you can operate with more latitude just because people are so confident in their ability of the, essentially the digital, their way to digitally track you and things like that. So most people think disguises are about changing your faces, but faces are only part of recognition. Humans remember movement, confidence, presence, behavior patterns far more than they ever remember details, right? So that's always come back to it. It's about patterns. Are you disrupting the patterns? If you're disrupting the patterns, then you stand out. You want to, if you change your pattern, it needs to be changed to blend in with the patterns around you. Because the greatest disguise isn't a beard, it isn't a wig, it isn't a pair of glasses. It's understanding how people perceive the world, because that's what you are dealing with. That's what you are competing against. That is essentially your opposition, which are the people throughout the world. And maybe not necessarily operatives, but there are civilians who may notice this guy and be like, hey, did anybody see that guy? He looked really kind of weird. That can all happen. Some random civilian could be the one to compromise you. Because people don't just recognize what you look like, they recognize who they believe you are. Like, what pattern do you represent to them in their mind? So you have to be very careful in the particular environments that you operate in. So, all right, everybody. Well, I appreciate all of you. I hope you guys enjoyed this stream. It's time for me to go and ride some horses and then go to the gym and complete day 4 of the fast. So I'm still hangry. I hope everybody enjoyed everything. There will be a video out later this weekend. Will be our fully edited, pre-recorded video, and it will be about selection. And I actually do cover SEAL Team 6's green team and RRD in it as well, because I didn't really cover that in the live, but I am covering that. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you guys on Monday.